So when I was a child, back in 90s in Russia, it was super hard to get new clothes, because 90s were like crazy time, and you had to go to a second-hand shop to get new clothes, not even new, like to get some clothes, or you had to, like, if you had an older friend, the same gender as you were, like you had to take clothes from them, which they outgrew now. So, and I think that scarcity really made me eager to do something within the fashion industry and within the fashion world. And I think my big why is to help little or not so little girls who want to express themselves via fashion.
Hey, I'm Matt. Welcome to my podcast, The Imagining, a time to explore the imagination, creativity, and mental health. All of the conversations I'm having form part of the research for my new book. I hope that you have the opportunity during this time to discover something new about yourself. I would just love it, just if you could introduce yourself, because me and you, although we've bumped into each other numerous times, had a lot of conversations at our co-working space. Mm-hmm. I don't know an awful lot about you.
Right.
So just fill in the gaps. Tell me about you. That can be whatever it is. Talk about your job, maybe where you grew up, who you are, what's important to you.
Right. Okay, let's start. My name is Lisa. I was born in one of the former Soviet countries back in 1992. I don't know if that's important for this conversation, but basically after 6 months, the USSR collapsed. So I always say that I was raised by Soviet people in a pretty much Soviet country back then.
Right.
And I was surrounded by everything Soviet when I grew up.
So the first 6 months of your life were actually in a Soviet country?
It wasn't a Soviet country anymore. But what I was trying to say is that basically people who lived in that country, they were pretty much Soviet people still, because it's just happened. So I moved to the UK when I was 25, so 6 years ago.
Why did you move?
Right, so that's a very complicated question, and I was trying to answer that question to myself, like literally yesterday, like why did I move to the UK? And it wasn't because of any like political reasons or anything. I just wanted to challenge myself, to try something new in this life, to see how people live in other countries. And basically, maybe one of the reasons is to give my children a better life.
Right.
More choices.
More choices. So do you feel like where you were living, there was limited choices? What did them limited choices look like? Was that education? Was that social stuff?
Right. Okay, so for the context of this conversation, I should say I used to live in Russia, so that's where I was born and raised. And I didn't feel like the choices were limited. I feel like you can make the most of the place where you live if you feel like it. But I just really wanted to challenge myself and see how I can move to a different country and build my life there and see how it goes. And I would say that definitely it gave me like more choices in this life, just because I met new people. I also, so I just decided to change my career twice when I moved to the UK. I used to be an IT analyst when I moved to the UK, and then I decided to learn how to do software engineering. So that was a change. And then 3 years later, I founded a fashion brand. So
that's a jump.
That's a very big jump, isn't it?
From IT analyst to fashion brand owner and designer.
Yes, it seems like a very drastic change.
Yeah, and quite random. I mean, when I think of IT analysts and people that work in that sphere, I don't really think of you.
I would say I was a strange software engineer, a software engineer who had always been into fashion. Yeah. And I remember meeting someone in the co-working space where we met the other day, and they were like, "Oh, you were a software engineer. You don't look like a software engineer. And I know.
Yeah, it's crazy. So what was the jump like from software engineer to fashion brand owner? How did you go about making that trip?
Oh, okay. It wasn't very random, to be honest. So I met my co-founder in the Chelmsford Library, which is
Right.
very random.
Yeah, it is.
You never know where you meet where you will meet your co-founder. So we met in the Chelmsford Library, and she's a girl from a former Soviet country as well. She's from Kazakhstan, and I think there are some similarities in people from that part of the world.
Right.
We were raised in very different conditions to the conditions where you were raised in, probably. And when we both came to the UK, we were very ambitious, and we still are, and we wanted to do something big and meaningful,
Right.
you want to achieve something really important.
Yeah.
So we started, me and the co-founder, we started thinking about what kind of businesses we could do together. And we had so many very random ideas, we wanted to do, what's it called, a consultancy business, a nail salon. We were just trying to fill in the gaps, on
Yeah.
the market. And we felt like Chelmsford needs another nail salon because, we are Eastern European girls, we care about nails a lot. So, and then all of a sudden, I was sitting on the second floor of that co-working space. She came to me and she was like, oh, look, she was holding her phone in her hands. She had my Instagram profile open. And she was like, look, you look like a fashion influencer. Look at your photos. You look amazing. I was like, no way. I didn't really believe her. And I was like, no. So what happened next is that I remembered her saying that. And then I thought, well, she might be right. I looked at my photos and I thought, well, I'm a software engineer, but basically I have always been into fashion, and you could see that from my photos, definitely.
Yeah.
So she suggested to do a fashion business together, and we felt like it was a good match for the both of us. So she's a very business person and she enjoys doing business things, and I enjoy fashion and everything creative, despite being a software engineer at that point. So that's how it started.
That's really crazy. And what is that looking like now? So that was, how many years ago was that?
That was April 2022. So it's been 1 year and a half.
So it's been 1 year and a half. And what's that year been like since saying, right, we should step into this fashion brand world?
First of all, it was super hard to allow myself to start a fashion brand. I didn't think I was capable of doing that, and I didn't feel like it was the right decision at that point because it's risky, it's not guaranteed, it's not a very common career choice. And I was a software engineer. Come on, so many people want to be a software engineer. They want to get into that profession, and I already was in that profession. So it was a super hard choice, but I had to do some work. What I'm trying to say is that I had to convince myself to start that business. So we founded the business. We continued working full-time on our normal day jobs, and then we continued to do the business in parallel with our jobs. So I finished doing software engineering in June this year, and I has been a full-time creative director since then.
Wow, that's amazing. And how does that feel? Because that's just by the looks of your face, for anyone that's only listening to this, you're really proud of stepping into that. Does it feel amazing, or most of the time are you feeling a bit like, oh, this is just really hard, what am I doing? Or is it like, I love my life?
I feel different, I have to say. I have ups and downs, and basically I can feel great one day, I can be so proud, I can be so happy, and then the other day I feel like a complete sheet. I don't know if I can say that word on this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I found that when you do something creative, you often, or when you do your own business, should I say, you always feel on top of the world one day, and then very, you feel very low the other day. And that's just I think it's a very important part of that process. You
Absolutely.
just have to.
So one of the phrases that I've been workshopping with my dad, who is my thinking buddy when it's coming to writing my book, we were trying to address the question of whether everyone is creative or not. And we decided that we thought everyone was creative, but we didn't think everyone was courageous. We're still, that's kind of, everyone's creative, not everyone's creative, courageous, question mark. It's not a statement, it's a question that I'm trying to explore. It sounds to me like this has been like a massive exercise in courage for you to actually do this.
Yes.
Because there's so much, like you've already said, there's risk involved. You've moved from a different country where you grew up. I'm assuming your family still live like the other, well, not the other side of the world, but thousands of miles away.
Right.
Do you feel like you have to exercise courage every day in your creativity?
Absolutely. I even think that if you want to, like, first of all, I agree that creativity is not binary. Like, people often think that they are either creative or they are not creative. It's not that black and white. Creativity is a spectrum.
Yeah.
And I think you can develop your creativity if you really need to. And if you want to develop your creativity, you have to be courageous as well, as you say. And I've been practicing this since I started the brand. And it was one of the biggest challenges for me. Like, naturally, I'm very cool and contained, a little bit shy. And I've like, well, I moved to a different country. That was a very bold step.
Absolutely.
And then the second bold step was to found the brand. And after that, you have to persist and you have to keep going. That's really hard. Like, it's easier to start than to continue, I would say.
And to be honest with you, it never got released to the world. I only did like some sketches of a couple of fashion items that I was like, oh, I'm gonna step into that world.
Right.
And it looked so intimidating and so hard to be someone that steps into the fashion world, because I just feel like there's a lot of competition. And two, it feels like maybe there's quite a higher risk of failure in the fashion world, just by virtue of the fact that there's material costs, there's designing costs, you need to do photo shoots, you need to do websites, and then you do marketing. It's like a big drawn out process. So what are the tools that you're using to keep finding the courage to overcome, just from myself and when I've looked into fashion brands, what are the tools that you're using to overcome all of these obstacles in achieving what you've set out to achieve?
Right. Okay, that's a really good question. I think I'm still looking for those tools. Like, I do have a few, but you need to have more tools to help
more
you.
More tools, bigger, more powerful tools.
Yes, exactly. So I think like one of the most important ones is to find your big why. Like, why are you doing that? Obviously, to stay in your like normal career is easier, so you must have a very good reason to do what you do. It really doesn't matter if it's a fashion business or I don't know, any kind of business, or it maybe not even a business. Like, you can just, I don't know, pursue your career in art or anything. You have to find your big why, and finding that big why really helped me. And I just keep remembering myself about that.
What is your big why?
Okay. So when I was a child, back in 90s in Russia, it was super hard to get new clothes. Like, because 90s were like crazy time, and you had to go to a second-hand shop to get new clothes, not even new, like to get some clothes, or you had to, like, if you had older friend, the same gender as you were, like you had to take clothes from them, which they outgrew now. So, and I think that scarcity really made me eager to do something within the fashion industry and within the fashion world. And I think my big why is to help little or not so little girls who want to express themselves via fashion. I want to help them to do that, and I want to give them an appropriate tool to do that. And I think fashion, like clothes, is that tool that, like, I look at fashion as a therapy.
Yeah.
It really helps. It changes how you look externally, but it also changes how you feel internally. So I want to give those people who feel a bit insecure and shy a tool to feel better, if it makes sense.
You're so right. So one of the things that I've done in the past, whenever I've felt like I've wanted to, or whenever I felt intimidated by someone who I've considered more important or more powerful than I am, I would dress to do one of two things. One, I would either dress like them to try and be on the same level as them.
It's very clever.
Or I would try and dress in the most opposite way that I could as possible to make a statement. So if they were a real business type fresh suit person, I would rock up in my tracksuit, wearing my hat, barely shaven, and really try and make a point just by what I was wearing. Okay. And in a sense, you're using what you wear as a way of, one, being creative in the way that you engage in the world, but two, as a way of supporting your mental health and how you feel about yourself in any given context.
Right.
And I think that's something that maybe we miss in a lot of clothing and fashion, is like what you've said, you can dress in a way that informs you internally about how you could feel today.
Right.
I think that sometimes we assume that we need to wear stuff that echoes what we feel inside, but it maybe also works the other way around, doesn't it? It's like if you wear something really nice that you really enjoy wearing and makes you feel comfortable and confident, it can have a really positive effect on your mental health if you're feeling.
It can. I think, like, as I said, fashion is a real therapy. And by wearing, like, there are different ways of using that as a tool, fashion as a tool. Like, as you said, you can, your clothes can reflect what you feel inside. Clothes can help you to feel differently, or you can use clothes to express yourself, which is a huge help to, like, so many people. They crave expression, and they can do that via fashion.
Absolutely. Well. And actually, one of the other things that I observed just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about it earlier. I was in Guatemala 2 weeks ago, and I was in a prison, and all of the boys in there were all dressed the same.
Right.
Grey jogging trousers, grey top, shaved heads, grey hat. And that was it. So actually you can also use fashion as a way of oppressing people, can't you? In
exactly.
a way. Like you can, and not that I'm saying school uniform is, it's not designed to be oppressive, but by virtue of having a uniform and everyone looking the same, you can use it to, it sounds really bad to say control, but do you know what I mean? So much happens because of what we wear. It's really crazy. So what do you feel that you're doing with your brand? What have you thought about when you've been designing the clothes that you're designing? Have you designed them on that premise? Have you designed them? What are you trying to address for someone by, what do you hope they feel when they wear your clothes? I guess is the question I'm trying to ask.
Yes. So what I'm trying, when I design our clothes, I want the person who will wear the clothes to feel what they want to feel, really. And they can feel more comfortable in our clothes. They can feel more artistic in our clothes. I just want the person who will wear our clothes to feel a complete freedom and to find the right meaning for them in that clothes. So we are specifically targeting artistic people as well. They are one of our target audiences. Right. And we just noticed that there is a lack of sustainable yet creative clothes on the market. And we thought, well, let's do comfortable clothes, let's make creative designs, but let's also make them sustainable. And then everyone finds something in that. If you want to shop sustainably, we've got Vault Urban clothes.
It's so exciting. I feel like I've been just I've only caught the last couple of months of the journey, but it's really amazing to see a fashion brand come to life in a sense, because it's all, the last couple of months have been quite important for you guys, haven't they, really?
Yes.
In terms of beginning to achieve that why that you've had, because you've recently did your photo shoot.
Yes.
You've recently, I still haven't seen any in real life because I wasn't at the presentation you did, but it must be feeling like, oh my gosh, we are beginning to see a bit of this dream come into reality.
Yes, that's exactly what we feel at the moment. And I remember seeing like real people wearing the shirts I designed on the photo shoot. And it was such an amazing feeling. It's just when your creativity finally becomes a physical object, right? And seeing like real people wearing your clothes is just amazing. I actually wanted to ask you a question, if that's okay.
Fire away, please.
So you mentioned you wanted, or you were trying to get into that fashion world and do some sketches. But did you do any sketches? Did you draw something?
No, I well, maybe. There's a few little bits. One of my big I really am on board with what you're saying. I think fashion is such a beautiful tool for expressing yourself, both in terms of me putting out there how I feel, but also wearing something that I hope makes me feel a different way from how I'm feeling. One of the things that I really grapple with at the moment is, how do you both be strong and elegant? And I think that's really hard for men in what they wear. I think there's a lot of clothes that put out this like strong, smart, powerful look. But I think there's a lack of elegance in what men get to wear.
Right.
And I don't feel fully like I am at, I don't know what you'd call it. I think it's maybe like metrosexual kind of clothing. I would never dress in like a woman's clothing. Like that's not my vibe. But I've always like wanted to wear clothes that are more free flowing and long, and like some of the jackets I try and buy are longer. And so I think that was really my big why in it, was purely selfish when I was looking into it. I also was like trying to expand potential business avenues like all of us hustlers do. I was like, oh, what would be a viable business? But I think that for me, it was really down to that. I would love to be more elegant in what I wear, and more flowing and more graceful around the room, which maybe sounds a bit contradictory to what certainly a lot of my friends would think, or a lot of guys I would know would think about how they dress. I mean, some of them probably don't even think about what they wear. They just reach into the cupboard and grab the first t-shirt that they see. But for me, I was like really fascinated by how you could do both things. So I went to the V&A museum. I had a big men's fashion thing through the years, loads of historical pieces. And actually, you only have to go back 100, 200 years. And men's fashion was a lot more elegant. Like men were wearing much longer, much more ornate pieces of clothing. Right. And now just in shops for guys, it just feels like it's wear this t-shirt, wear these jeans, and off you go. And that, it wasn't satisfying for me. And I still haven't fully found a place where I can find all of them clothes. And especially I think you can at the very high-end designer level, because that tends to be the sort of men that feel the same way I feel, will be like really high-end designer. But you can't walk into a high street shop and find these things for guys.
It's impossible.
Or even find things that are kind of in that I don't mind paying like good money for things that I'll wear, but £1,000 for a jacket is like unrealistic for me. But £150 for a jacket that I know that I'll wear and look after, that would do them things. And it was even actually the reason, just speaking on that beauty and strength and grace kind of an elegance topic, it was even the reason why we gave our son the name Indiana, because we felt it embodied that strength but also that elegance.
I see.
Everyone else might be like, no, that doesn't embody strength or elegance. I don't know, but to me and my wife, that's what we were really trying to pursue in the name that we're giving to him. So that was really what I was trying to explore with the fashion. I think I just hit the obstacles that you'll be fully aware of. Obstacles like, how do I make clothes? I didn't have a higher budget to invest in the first place. And I was really keen on doing, like, having the values that you had around sustainability and ethical sourcing and stuff like that. And I do think that there's a cash flow reality that hits with that. But I was considering buying a sewing machine and like
and sewing
going in
yourself
and just actually making it.
Oh, amazing.
That seems to be, that's been my port of call when it comes to all creative endeavors that I've thought about really is, well, I don't have the money to pay someone to do it. So I guess I better learn how to sew, or I better learn how to film, or I better learn how to draw, or whatever it may be. And maybe one day that will still become a reality, or I could just let you do it.
You mentioned that, I don't know if that's true, but you just mentioned that the fashion business, the fashion industry is super competitive.
Yeah.
And it might be one of the things that put you off doing fashion business. But what I found out is that people in any industry, it's not just fashion, they don't have to be scared of like competition because the right people will find you eventually. So we only connect with people who we share values with, and via like Vol Open, I'm sharing my values.
Yeah.
So people with relevant values, but like similar values, will connect with our brand. So I was worried about competition, and I still am worried about it. But I think that if we explain our values and if we show them in an appropriate way, and we will be able to connect with the relevant people and the relevant audience.
That's a really lovely point, actually. And I think that maybe that's something that we miss and don't talk about enough, is that actually, even when it comes down to hard business talk, like who's our audience and who's going to buy our stuff, really your values connect with each other. And I think your brand, from what I've seen so far, has done a really good job of identifying values and putting that at the forefront of your marketing and who you are. And, you know, I really think and believe that it's going to really soar as a brand.
Thank
you. It looks
you.
amazing, and I'm definitely going to be first in line.
Will you? That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
very pleased.
That's good. So I want to take a little dive into a slightly different area and just pick up back again on this culture piece. When I sent out some initial questions to you, like I do for the podcast, all of the podcast guests, one of you commented about how you felt really glad that I was raising culture as a point around imagination and creativity and mental health. I know that in your why for starting a fashion business, obviously you've mentioned where you grew up as part of the why behind what you're doing. How do you feel growing up in such a different culture to where you live now? What do you feel, what's been the impact of the culture that you're from? What's that been on your creativity, your imagination, your mental health? Like, feel free to explore that.
Yes. Okay. So I've been thinking on that for quite a while now, and maybe we can explore that together because I don't have an answer.
Yeah, for sure.
But I was thinking, so you've been to Romania,
Yeah.
and you've probably seen you've definitely seen, because we just had a conversation about that, those panel buildings, like multi-story buildings made of panels. There are the same buildings all over the former USSR. Well, I
Right.
know Romania had never been a part of the USSR,
Yeah.
but still they were a part of the communist
Yeah.
bloc of countries, so to speak. I was wondering, and I still am, how being exposed to such a simple and minimalistic architecture
Yeah.
how does it affect your creativity? So if we consider creativity as a spectrum, like what level of creativity do those buildings promote? I'm wondering. And what do you think on this?
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point to raise. I mean, I've got to assume that the architecture kind of promotes uniformism and doing the same thing and not breaking out of the mold.
Right.
That would be maybe my interpretation of it. At first, it would kind of feel like if the idea of all the buildings looking the same is to make everyone feel like they are the same. And I don't know whether that is, to me, it feels like that's not a promoter of creativity.
Right.
Because inherently I feel like creativity is about stepping out of the normal, stepping out of the routine, stepping out of the uniform and conformity. And then buildings, to me, feel like they're all about conforming. That might be a wrong interpretation of it, because I can't remember where I read the article, but a lot of our architecture in England and the more Western countries feels like it's under the name minimalism. All of design is becoming almost very simple. And even in that, it's not the same as the architecture that I saw in Romania or even Albania, which was another former communist country. That kind of minimalistic design of everything's very flat and very white or grey
Grey.
or black. Yes. It doesn't scream creativity to me or think differently. But I know that there's some people that would say, oh, I do my best thinking when I'm just in a white box.
I know.
So it's not as simple as just saying that. It's not. But what about, because you were surrounded by it for years and years and years, and I only had months of feeling that way. Do you feel like there is a lasting impact of that kind of architecture? I
think there was a lasting impact, to be honest. As you said, those buildings, like they were built with one single purpose. They were built for people to live in. That's it. They were not built for you to enjoy their appearance. They were not built to improve the appearance of the city, for people to live in. And they serve that purpose perfectly. And as you said, they don't scream creativity. They don't promote. They don't help you to think out of the box, really, I don't think. But at the same time, what I noticed, like speaking to my parents about that and speaking to my co-founder just today, she said, oh, you know what? Actually, like living in such environment helps you to find beauty in places where you don't normally look for beauty.
Wow.
Like, like gray, moody streets.
Yeah.
Like sometimes depressing districts and everything. Like you learn how to find beauty in every like little, in places where you don't normally look for beauty. And I think it actually helps me a lot now, because you just work with what you have and you find beauty like where you live, regardless of the place you live. So I think this really helped me to build that like resilience and to notice things and to be grateful for those things.
That's really beautiful. I guess it's that older saying of creativity in kind of confiance is often like a really powerful way of being creative. When you have boundaries on that creativity and limitations, it makes you think harder. So it's a really interesting observation though. Do you feel like it has an effect on like how much imagining was going on in when you were growing up living in Russia, do you feel like the imagination was a very rich part of the culture? Because I guess there's been a lot of change in a lot of these Eastern European
Yes.
countries. They've seen so much change over the last 50 years, perhaps even more change than a lot of the rest of the world. So in some ways, it looks like there's been a lot of imagination, but did it feel like that?
It did actually feel like that. Imagining things was a big part of my childhood. Like I remember, like I remember coming to my parents and saying, well, I actually want a creative profession. I didn't know what kind of creative profession I wanted, but they were like, oh, you know what? Well, engineering is a very good profession.
Gotta be an
Yes.
engineer.
You've got to be an engineer. So they didn't really support me in pursuing a creative career at that point, but they never limited my hobbies. And I spent time playing music, doing arts, and imagining music videos for different songs. And I spoke to my mom the other day, literally yesterday, asked her that question. I did a little research before the podcast, and she said, oh, you know what? I actually spent lots of time imagining what the future could look like when she was a child, and she lived in a very little village back in 70s when she was little. And I think imagination was actually a big part of everyone's life back then. And you just had to create maybe a little world in your head to live in. Sometimes you had to escape from reality, to be honest. But I'm talking about 90s when I was growing. Obviously it has changed since then, but I feel like it was a big part of my life.
So to round this off, I know that you dried some of them down, but you're achieving some really amazing things. You're an incredible person. You have shared so many wise words already. What have been the key sources of inspiration for you on your journey over the last however long? What are the books that you're reading? What are the podcasts that you're listening to? Obviously, you're listening to the Imagining podcast by me.
Of course, I do actually.
What have been the real sources of inspiration for you?
It can be a bit surprising, but actually all sorts of business podcasts and books have been my inspiration. I think I'm a little bit stuck between two words, between the creative world of fashion, of creating clothes and everything, and the world of software engineering, of structured expressions and thoughts, and everything had been very structured until I quit my software engineering career. So I still tend to listen to people who have some relevant experience in any kind of business. And actually those people say so many wise words which can be applicable to any person. Sorry, what I'm trying to say is that sometimes you have to listen to a person from a different field to get some really wise ideas. And I read one book which is called Working Hard, Hardly Working by Grace Beverly, who's she's a fashion brand founder as well, and she has multiple businesses. But there was one sentence in that book which really impressed me, and it was just so relevant to me when I read that sentence. The sentence says, time learning is never wasted. And at that point, I was super, super worried about juggling software engineering and fashion business. And I felt like I wasted time doing software engineering, or I felt like I would waste time. I did software engineering because I was going to switch to my fashion business. But when I read that sentence, it really gave me such a relief. And I feel like listening to people from different backgrounds is super useful as well. Say the Diaries of the CEO by Stephen Bartlett. He invites different people from so many different backgrounds, and this has been such an inspiration as well, listening to their experiences and their thoughts.
Oh, amazing.
So
they sound really good, and I agree.
Do you listen to that?
I've listened to that. I listened to that podcast. I haven't read that book, so maybe I will maybe I'll find that one. And finally, where can people find, firstly, you and follow what you're doing, but what's the latest updates on Vault Urban? When can people get some stuff from your brand?
Okay, so you can find me on Instagram. That's the main platform that I use. You can find Vault Urban on Instagram as well. I linked Vault Urban profile on my profile. And hopefully we're going to launch early next year. Well, at least we will do some pre-orders and people will be able to pre-order our clothes. And I'm absolutely looking forward to it.
I am so excited. I'm really excited for when it all comes out, and maybe we'll try and do a little collab on something. Maybe write something, make a little film together or something.
That would be amazing. I would love that.
That'd be really cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for being vulnerable in what you said, and I think people are really gonna be moved by what you've said and learn and feel encouraged and inspired by what you've said. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Imagining. I hope that you've had the opportunity to discover something new about yourself. If you wouldn't mind and you enjoyed listening, then I would be really appreciative if you subscribed on whatever channel you're listening on.